You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 11th of August 2026 on Monocle Radio.
Why freighter crews of the future will need to wrap up warm, could moving the Lebanese state online make it actually work, and the European country closing down cold calls. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Erin O'Halloran and Justin Quirk will discuss the day's big stories, and we'll look ahead to, but obviously not directly at, tomorrow's solar eclipse over Europe. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and I'm joined today by Erin O'Halloran, historian at Cambridge University and author most recently of East of Empire, and by Justin Quirk, journalist, brand consultant, editor, etc. I think that pretty much covers everything, doesn't it?
That was quite the hard sell there, Andrew, on my...
Well, hello to you both.
Hello.
Justin, you first of all are just back from Antwerp. This is like being at the Royal Geographic Society.
Yeah.
I expect you've prepared slides.
Hard recommend on Antwerp. First time visitor. Primarily went for, there's a huge exhibition on there at the moment about the Antwerp Six, who were the huge group of fashion designers in the 80s and 90s, Dries Van Noten, people like that. Vast archival exhibition on there at the Fashion Museum. So first time visitor to Antwerp, went for that. Explored the new area around the docks, which has been very redeveloped, and the photography museum. So it was a culture-packed 24 hours, but a very hard recommend on the city.
OK, I've never been to Antwerp, and I have written that down accordingly. Erin, you, on the other hand, haven't been anywhere because you are going to make the case that why would you? Because you're in London in relatively temperate weather.
Well, it's precisely that. I spend most of the year just barely tolerating the cold, wet grey.
Mm-hmm.
I think that most of the year is a brilliant time to get out of London. But these months, when it's sunny and glorious, I don't know why you would leave. I feel like this is almost like the benefit that we get for paying the rest of the year in the poor weather. So I'm really enjoying myself puttering around in the neighborhoods.
Anything in particular?
My morning routine is the thing that gets me out of bed. I go to the yoga studio, I sit and have a coffee outside, I do my writing, I do my groceries, and I come home, and then I sit in the afternoon at my desk, and it's not very interesting. But the mornings being out in the neighborhood are really, really glorious at this time of year.
Which neighbourhood is this? You can give your neighbourhood a plug.
Yeah, I live in Finsbury Park, and I spend a lot of time in Crouch End. So shout out to N7 and 8.
Crouch End, for our overseas listeners, is quite fancy.
It's quite a cute little neighborhood, and I live on the slightly more dilapidated side of the hill, but I'm very close to it, and my yoga studio is there, so I spend a lot of time there.
Well, we will be returning to the subject of the sun over London later in the show, but we will start with an impressive yet somewhat depressing shipping milestone. Chinese shipping company Sea Legend is to launch the first regular freight service from Ningbo in Zhejiang to Felixstowe in Suffolk via the Arctic. The good news is that this will halve the usual 40-day schlep between the two ports. The bad news is that it has been made possible by climate change, which has melted sufficient ice to make the so-called Ice Silk Road navigable. Well, back in 2023, Monocle Radio's The Foreign Desk attended the Arctic Circle Assembly in Reykjavik, and among those we spoke to was Sim An, then Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, now Second Minister for Foreign Affairs of Singapore. Here is what she had to say.
Well, we're a trading nation, so we like to keep up with what's happening in the world, but trading nations don't think win-lose. We always think win-win. And the way we see it is that should new shipping routes open up, well, actually this means new opportunities because infrastructure investments would need to be made in terms of port facilities, for instance. We're also very conscious that in terms of the global maritime shipping, there's now a very big drive towards lowering emissions, towards being more green. And these are areas that our companies have already started working on. So we see this as an area that we would like to constantly observe. We would like to avail ourselves of the latest developments, but, we don't think win-lose.
That was Sim Ann, Singapore's Second Minister for Foreign Affairs, speaking to the Foreign Desk a couple of years and a bit back. Erin, first of all, do we buy the win-win analysis there, which I guess is to ask, are we enjoying the irony that climate-induced environmental degradation may bring about greener shipping?
It's kind of a difficult. I'm not trying to be pessimistic because I, generally speaking, applaud the win-win, glass half full sort of mentality. And certainly if we are going to have melting ice caps, there's all kinds of things we can do with the water. But that doesn't change the fact that we have to worry about survival and where that water is leaving some island nations, for example, who are going to be submerged as a result. So I think that there's a couple of different, prongs to this story. And for me, it's very difficult to get past the catastrophic rising temperatures part of it.
While we are looking at upsides, though, Justin, we will return to the catastrophic rising temperatures aspect. But is it possible, maybe, that this makes us all a bit less beholden to commercial shipping routes going via the Suez Canal, that general part of the world, which, as we have been reminded in recent months, is not always without its stresses? No,
and it's one of the stories that I think has been happening kind of quietly in the background for the last few years. Is a lot of what we have thought of for our kind of lifetime as the traditional sort of trade routes and flows of the world are getting redrawn. I mean, shipping, as you say, is the obvious one. There's also been a lot of focus on Straits of Hormuz, but also in things, there's still the Houthis are still winging shots at boats in the Red Sea. So the Bab al-Mandab Strait has been closed at various points. So it's not, obviously the focus is on what's happening with Iran at the moment, but there are other routes there that are closing off. I flew to Korea about a year and a half ago, and we had to do an extremely odd circuitous route because between Russia to the north and parts of the Middle East to the south, even with air corridors, there is an increasingly narrowing route at certain points. So I think while these things, are very novel at the moment, they're possibly this is a glimpse of where, the globe is kind of reorientating itself.
I mean, Erin, this is hopefully not news to a Canadian and still less to the people in charge of Canada, which is, of course, an Arctic nation. But is this not, if you look at the route that the Northern Sea route traces, which is basically the northern coast of Russia, is this not potentially Strait of Hormuz to the power whatever? Well,
precisely. I think one of the points to be made about the global trade routes and the fact that, we have these problematic ones in the Middle East, let's move them somewhere else, is the trade routes are not problematic because these regions are, and I really emphasize this as a historian of the Middle East, it's not that the people there are somehow unusually violent. It's that they're in a region of the world that is hot property and everybody has a thumb or more fingers in. And as a result, there's very high stakes. There's a lot of money to be won and lost. And that creates circumstances, geopolitical stakes that result in violence and cycles of, instability. And
so we have all this to look forward to in the Arctic.
Well, this is it. We could just move these north. And suddenly, if these become hot properties, and again, the climate change element, if these become warm properties, hot properties, we're going to be dealing with more than boiling seas. We're also going to be dealing with heightened geopolitical stakes that are at the moment controlled by Russia and China. That doesn't sound to me like a recipe for stability and, Pacific trade.
Well, indeed. I mean, how sinister or otherwise is it, Justin, that China grandly claims for itself what it calls near Arctic status, which is a bit of a reach because I own a globe and it isn't. But they possess icebreakers and are building more. These obviously appearing to be of limited utility in the South China Sea.
Yeah, I presume they're not getting used in the Malaccan Straits or wherever they'll be going further north.
Rarely, I would think. Yeah.
I mean, it's the scale of the challenge. I mean, just to sort of take a step back and look at it as almost like a feat of engineering. When they're saying there's been this huge rise in order for ice-class vessels, which, I mean, you've been on one. I mean, there are these enormous feats of structural engineering in themselves. But then I was looking down at some sort of reports on the potential risks of this route. So they said there's weather changing, the ice closing up and boats just getting stuck is apparently
the trip to which you allude, a story I did for Monocle years ago, I spent 10 days on a Finnish icebreaker. A couple of times it was scrambled to rescue ships which had been stuck in the ice, which can happen really unbelievably quickly.
This is what I didn't realise, is that it can happen much faster. And also, with the route going that far north, you're out of reach of GPS at various points, apparently. So I'm not sure how much you would have to pay me to get on board one of those boats as the ship's cook. But I think anyone who is doing that route is earning their money that week.
I just want to go back to that point you were making, Erin, about how trouble tends to follow trade routes. Is the inevitability now that part of the world is going to become swiftly even more militarized?
I think we've been watching this happen for at least the last 20 years or so as people sort of woke up to what was going to happen with ice caps melting and with geopolitical competition between Russia and the West sort of coming out of, let's say, thawing out. So I do think that this is, very much the trajectory that we're on. None of these things are inevitable, of course, because we live in a world that is dynamic and can change quickly. But it does seem at the moment that we are moving towards great power competition in the Arctic. And there's an interesting North American dimension to this because Canada and the United States are no longer the incredibly cozy bedfellows that they recently were. Mm-hmm.
Well, to Lebanon now, which for far too long has been a cautionary parable of the importance of good governance, inasmuch as it is an example of what happens when good governance is lacking, verging on downright absent. An effort is to be made to address this with a $150 million loan from the World Bank, intended to provide Lebanon with a new digital infrastructure, which will, it says here, allow Lebanese citizens easier access to government services, many of which still require the filling in of arcane paperwork, in-person visits to indifferent ministries and or the sliding of a paper bag full of currency across the appropriate desk. The Digital Acceleration Project, as it is known, will be overseen by Lebanon's First Minister of Technology and Artificial Intelligence, the Harvard-educated economist Kamal Shahadi. Erin, there is doubtless a long answer to this question, but given, what I will refer to as Lebanon generally, could this actually work?
Nope. Sorry. I lived in Lebanon for many years, and I've actually been through all of the processes that you described.
As have I.
Yeah, moving to all of the different ministries, et cetera, and doing everything in large format paper notation books with pencils to, check whether your passport has, these details and those ones. And so I'm very sympathetic to the project in the abstract. What I don't understand is why this is a major focus of government attention, energy, and funding, and why they're signing up for this at a point in time when they seem to have bigger fish to fry and larger problems on their plate. I realize that President Allen has suggested that this is because they need to get digital services to displaced residents who need to, register for some sort of government assistance, et cetera. I would suggest that the money would probably be better spent on direct, people going and helping displaced residents, but also getting the negotiations sorted with the Israelis so that Israel could withdraw from Lebanese territory, because they currently have half of the country displaced and a large swath of territory under effective occupation.
Justin, to broaden this out a bit beyond Lebanon for the moment, there is this excitable conventional wisdom developing among governance types and policy wonks that digital infrastructure of the sort that we are seeing built in Estonia, Ukraine, to name a couple of pioneers, is necessarily more honest, efficient and transparent, and yet I have a WhatsApp chat log of my street group about how on earth the new online parking permit system works, which would seem to suggest otherwise. Yeah,
and I think the thing you often see, whether it's in, and I'm sure Erin has encountered this in academia, we've encountered it in media companies, is these systems are often sold with great claims attached to them by the people who have a vested interest in selling you these systems. I would imagine the same thing happens at a governmental level, and the scale of the challenge in Lebanon there, this obviously I would defer to Erin on this, but the money they're talking about there for this project sounds large, and then you look at, they're saying even just from the 2023 to 2024 round of conflict, notwithstanding everything prior to it, the World Bank estimated the conflict's total economic cost at $14 billion, splitting down the middle between physical damage and financial damage. And as best as one can tell, I mean, one of the things that appears to have stopped the country wobbling over completely is a mixture of a sort of huge amount of mutual aid groups within the country, often sort of quite small ad hoc things, and also an absolutely vast amount of remittance coming from the Lebanese diaspora. Is obviously a huge one in America, but also Brazil, Argentina. So at one point during the financial crisis, that was topping out at about a third of the country's GDP was being sent back piecemeal from abroad. It's dropped to about 22% now. But I mean, that's still, I mean, partly an enormous testament to the generosity of Lebanese people abroad. But I mean, really, that I suspect is what's propping the country up and has prevented it from collapsing into something. It's
also a testament, Aaron, to the success and the endeavour of Lebanese people abroad, and this is one of the many maddening aspects of it. And I'm wondering what you thought about this, having seen it up close, because everywhere in the world that Lebanese people have gone, my own country, Australia included, they have been tremendously successful. And I realise you can get into a weird area stereotyping people by their virtues as well, but it just seems baffling that how you can take an entire country full of Lebanese people and somehow go broke. It just seems completely counterintuitive.
My mother would say that it needs to move. It's just in a really rough neighborhood. The neighbors are disaster, and they need to just find another place to be. I think that just getting back to heightened geopolitical stakes, everybody with a vested interest. Lebanon is sandwiched between Syria and Israel on the Mediterranean coast, and it has long been a clearinghouse between Europe and the Middle East region, and everybody has a fist in there. So as a result, you've got frankly, very little interest. And I think that this project I would include, it's like very little interest in what is actually of use for the Lebanese citizens, very little interest in what is in their best interest, and much more focus on what can be extracted, what can people get out of this little patch of geopolitically vital territory.
Just to follow that up, Erin, and it is another very much from the easier said than done basket, but will getting Lebanon beyond its present state, is it going to necessitate at some point a dismantling of the structure of well-intentioned sectarian power sharing, which does tend to silo the country into its own 100%. Interest groups?
I mean, this is what the 2019 revolution that was led by young people, most of my friends were on the streets in Lebanon in 2019. And, they were really calling for the abolition of this system of sectarian politics, which has calcified the leadership in the country into strongmen and their families and their, allies and cronies, basically. And it benefits simply those individuals. It doesn't benefit any community in particular. It really just benefits the political class as a whole. So dismantling that system and creating a system of Lebanese citizens, one vote, one person, is very much one of the central demands of the younger, more, I would say, technocratic and globally minded generation.
I just want to come back, Justin, finally to the wider thing about digital online services, etc., and trying to avoid us sounding like a table entirely full of Luddites, but do they ever work? Do they at least work when they account for the fact that most people who are actually going to have to use the things are possibly somewhat less technically adept and are also, and again I refer to the testament of my street WhatsApp group vis-a-vis parking permits, have just not the least interest in figuring out how any of this works. One of my neighbours did post today, I'm just simply never inviting anyone around who has a car ever again.
Well, this point has been made elsewhere that it's one of the, a feature, not a bug, of the tech industry, is that an industry that is populated by young urban dwelling people with disposable income is primarily addressing the problems of young urban people. So there will be any number of people working out ways to get your takeaway dinner to you 3 minutes quicker than it was last week. If you said to Bill, do you think you could run, easily affordable solar lighting across large swathes of the developing world, crickets. And, and there are people in the innovation space who are doing amazing work, but it does always sort of skew towards these things of, I live in a city, probably San Francisco or LA or London. What are the immediate problems in my purview? And I'm someone who's very, very technologically adept. And, particularly with an aging population, and also we have an analog infrastructure. And it's one of the things where if the conditions are right, and we saw this with kind of mobile telephony, particularly in East Africa, where a country can kind of leapfrog that stage because they're not trying to force a digital system into an analog one, they can actually get a bit of a jump on more sort of entrenched systems in countries in Europe.
Well, to France, where as of today, no citizen need ever again fear answering their phone and getting an earful of sales pitch. It is now illegal for any business to call any consumer without their prior consent, on pain of a €75,000 fine for individuals making such calls, or €375,000 for companies. So they'd need to sell an awful lot of double glazing to make it worthwhile. Lunatics, however, may consent to continue receiving such calls if they wish so to do, while Germany, for one, has long had a similar rule. Most other countries which care about this require a proactive opt-out from those who would prefer not to be pestered. Justin, the question that leapt to my mind most quickly was, who are these people who still answer their phones?
I mean, it's baffling.
I don't think I've answered my telephone this century.
Ringing off the hook. I didn't actually, because I read this and thought, obviously, brilliant, all for it, good on the French, one of my favourite groups of people kicking off at problems wherever they can. So, why don't we have something like that in this country? And I realised we do. The TPS, do you know about this?
This is the thing where you opt out, right?
Telephone preference service, which not only we got there well before France, the fines are significantly stiffer. £500,000 against companies if they start ringing you up unbidden. I'm enormously impressed. I think I was waiting for us to be the sick man of Europe. I
can't remember, Erin, whether I actually ever signed up to that or whether it is so long since I answered my phone that the universe has just taken the hint.
But just to clarify for listeners, including me, is this something that you need to opt into?
Yeah, you need to sign up.
So that is what France had in place until today. They've now reversed the obligation. The obligation is now on the company and not on the consumer or the individual, which I think is a really important transformation. And I suggest that this should be replicated across a lot of different sectors, that it should be, in fact, the burden should be on the company to not do the harmful behavior or the annoying behavior or whatever it is, and not on the consumer or the individual to be the person that has to know that this exists and find out about it and sign up for it, etc.
And I think the useful thing here is not that it's obviously not going to put off real scammers. If you're running some sort of like Yahoo phishing scam from a call centre, you're not going to stop doing this. But if it cuts out all the legitimate callers, it means, particularly again with an ageing population and older relatives, you can very safely say to them, if anyone cold calls you, it is a scam. Do not get held on the line by them. So I think hopefully it'll have some benefits in that way.
And to follow that up though, Justin, do our hearts bleed for Morocco's call centre sector? That's 50,000 jobs, $1 billion in revenue, and that is where most of the people cold calling French people are based, because obviously same language but lower labour costs.
Honestly, couldn't care less. I don't want to sound uncharitable about our Moroccan friends. Great country, great people. I really don't care if a few call centres go out. I'm sure they can find something else to do.
See, Erin, I was surprised to discover that this was literally still a thing, that any legitimate company is still cold calling people, trying to sell them stuff, because we now live in an age, one, where nobody sane that I know of ever picks their phone up anyway, and two, we now live in a world where you can get individually tailored advertisements sent direct to whichever screen you're gazing into. I mean, I know they don't work. I speak as somebody who about 2 years ago ordered a shed, and that's all I ever now see is advertisements for sheds, as if Big Shed is convinced that was just the beginning of a collection. So I'm not convinced about their efficacy either, but who on earth is picking up a phone from a cold caller and saying, God, great, yes, I'll take 10?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. I don't have a good answer. I will note that I pick up my phone all the time. I get called all the time and I pick it up all the time. But usually people that I know
if
and
you
their
stop
names,
answering, they'll stop calling you.
their names like show up.
They're the worst, though, people who know you.
Yes, quite recently, I realized that actually I don't need to pick up the phone if it says possible scammer, which it does very frequently.
Did you think that was their name?
No, I mean, I just
to Mr. and Mrs. Scammer, a child.
As in, I don't know who's picking up. I don't know where the money is being made. Like, who is getting a payday out of this?
I should say, in
Mysterious.
the Moroccan call centre's defence, they claim that only about 20% of it is sales work. I think there's also things like market research, which I did that for about 2 weeks as a job in my early 20s. And if you just want to get abused repeatedly about 20 times an hour in different colourful ways, it's a great job. I couldn't stick it myself.
I think this is, in fact, what to say about the call centres in Morocco or anywhere else is that this is also a charitable service to those individuals who will now be encouraged to go and find something other than being abused on the phone to do with their days. I think it's probably a quiet relief to a lot of people working in Moroccan call centres.
Well, around 24 hours from right now, across much of Europe, the skies will be darkened by a near-total solar eclipse. Eclipse. Greenland, Iceland, Spain and Portugal will be treated to the most dramatic darkness. It is the first eclipse of this magnitude over the UK since 1999. There won't be another until 2090. When we'll all be dead, so enjoy it. And there has been according excitement. In the locations closest to the path of totality, hotel prices have reportedly doubled against this time last year. This would appear to chime with the findings of a survey by an attention-seeking corporate entity, which, in keeping with petulant programme policy we will not name, this notes an upsurge in travellers expressing interest in once-in-a-lifetime experiences, rather than just your average holiday. Justin, first of all, how excited are you for the eclipse?
Well, I'm managing my expectations because I remember the one in 99,
it was rubbish.
Yeah, it was rubbish. I went around, sat in a friend's back garden, we had a couple of beers, and then it went a bit grey and cloudy for about 10 minutes. It was
unusual for London, a bit grey and cloudy.
It was not the Soleil Lumiere I was expecting.
No.
But with my sort of professional head on, so I spent the last few years working for one of the world's sort of bigger travel companies, and this whole concept of what you might call experiential luxury was an absolutely huge deal. And partly when I was working there was covered the period of the North American solar eclipse in April 2024. We were selling hotels like dam busters during that period. And it was an interesting one to...
Were you gouging, Justin? Is that what you were doing?
We were just the middlemen, Andrew. Couldn't say. But there was like a belt that you could sort of draw across America that sort of went from like the bottom left-hand corner of Texas up to the sort of upper east sort of part of Maine. And so we were sort of frantically looking through all these sort of weird little places, like, because it was ending around places like sort of Potsdam and things. And it's like, God, like how many hotels actually are there in Potsdam that we can recommend? And there'll be some sort of like 2-star travel lodge there that you can sort of recommend to people.
But were some of these not places where if you turned up on the day, sort of stood on a box in the town square and told the locals, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, the sky will darken, you'd have been worshipped as some strange god?
It could have gone either way. You'd have been worshipped or stuffed inside a giant burning man. Could have gone either way. But it's a very... As sort of travel's globalised in that way, it's become a bigger and bigger thing. Because obviously the kind of basic premise of luxury is a lot of it's about manufacturing scarcity. And that's increasingly difficult to do with product. It's increasingly difficult to do even with things like hotel chains because everything rolls out and anyone can book a holiday anywhere if you've got the money. So these sort of once-in-a-lifetime things have become a much, much bigger driver. And the sort of conventional idea of luxury, at least in Western markets now, of sort of 7 stars and gold bath taps, doesn't really move the needle. Whereas, say, things like building trips around the Northern Lights, which was a huge driver for us when that was sort of at peak season. Those things are much more because people want the bragging rights. And I guarantee if these boats that we were discussing earlier in the show, if they start making their merry way from, an industrial port in China, there will be somebody who will pay money to go on one of those boats because they will want the bragging rights of saying to everyone else they know, I did this thing that you can't. And that's really what it's all about.
Erin, would you pay 100% over the odds for a hotel to be just under the darkest bit of a solar eclipse when, of course, you can get the same effect literally any other day by staying in the hotel and just drawing the curtain?
So I personally have to, this is the point where I have to admit that I am one of these millennial women who actually pays attention to astrology.
No.
And
you and Andrew have so much in common.
Yes, exactly. He's never going to have me on again. This is the end. This is the last time I'm invited
Exactly.
in.
Yeah, but it's been fun, though.
But basically,
and our listeners have enjoyed your contributions.
Yeah, thank you. So, but from an astrological perspective, eclipses are kind of they're exciting.
Justin's just erecting the ducking stool as we speak.
They're classified as like unstable. So it's unstable vibes, unstable voodoo. And that means you shouldn't look at them, which is also the advice from a scientific perspective.
That's because it will burn your retinas out.
You shouldn't celebrate them. You should probably just like stay home and mind your business. So that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow, which happens to be my birthday.
Oh, well, so hang on. Is this a complete astrological apocalypse then? If a total eclipse occurs on your actual birthday?
Let's put it this way, Andrew. I am not celebrating it. I am just going to let it pass me by, and I'll, come to you on the 13th or 14th.
So you're going straight home from this, sandbagging
under
all the
duvet.
Yeah, okay.
That's it.
Okay.
We're going to be laughing on the other side of our faces if she's correct.
Yeah, but she'll only be correct for her, Justin. Do you not understand how astrology works?
I don't know. There's larger implications. This one is supposed to lead to some sort of change in leadership. So let's see what happens.
Maybe Andrew's position on the Daily could be a risk.
There is apparently, I did see earlier, some talk of a move against the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Could that be it? That is in the other hemisphere.
It is entirely possible.
That is in the other hemisphere, though, where there isn't.
Same planet.
I just went cold.
Yeah, I know. Freakish when you think about it. Justin, though, on that thing of like the once-in-a-lifetime travel experiences, is this something people are genuinely hankering for, do you think? Or are they just trying to find ever more niche things of which they can take boring photos of themselves to put on Instagram, which no one will ever look at?
I'd say they're two sides of the same coin. In the Instagram photo dump is just our parents setting up a projector in the cellar to grandparents to show their holiday snaps. And the thing was,
nobody wanted to see them there neither.
But you still
Didn't stop them from doing it.
In the old days, you could get the jump on people in terms of travel experience purely by getting on a plane. You can't do that anymore. You have to go into sort of increasingly niche corners of the travel experience to do something that other people can't do. Because if you can do any experience and every single moron you've ever encountered is there doing the same thing with you, it sort of takes the shine off it a bit.
Well, just on that final thought, I was going to ask you each to recommend something which is a bit off the radar, a bit once in a lifetime. I mean, I would suggest going aboard a Finnish icebreaker, but you can't. They don't take tourists. I mean, they should. They could legitimately charge an absolute fortune for that. It was fantastic. But is there something, Erin, you have done or perhaps would like to do that would sort of fit that once in a lifetime thing? It is obviously not witnessing a total eclipse of the sun.
So last summer, about this time, I was reading that there was about to be the debut of a new production of Carmen, a new staging by a very celebrated Lebanese-Brazilian opera director from Sao Paulo. And I got on a plane in under a week's notice and went to Baalbek, the temple in the Bekaa Valley.
Spectacular spot.
Spectacular place. The Roman temple in the center of the Bekaa Valley, which was at the time under Israeli bombardment. And I told myself, if this production goes ahead and, then something happens to this temple, heaven forbid, and I wasn't there and I didn't get to see it as a massive opera buff who loves Lebanon and loves Baalbek, I thought, I'll never forgive myself. I'll never be able to, to live with myself. So I went and got to see this debut, and it was totally worth it. Okay,
that's a high bar, Justin. Get over that.
Pretty similar. I was going to say riding a jet ski around in Dubai.
Was that really it?
No, the problem is my travel experiences that I love are incredibly pedestrian in that I am basically the ideal Monocle reader in that I don't like going outside of cities and I really like just mooching about without much of an agenda. So my ideal trip is I always travel on my own, nearly always. Go somewhere that's, got a functioning metro system and mooch around smart galleries, go to some nice restaurants.
Antwerp
was great. Did Lisbon last month. Very similar. Again, hard recommend on Lisbon. Basically, 5 days with my phone turned off and potted around, ate nice food and looked at art, and that's kind of it for me. It's not going to see a once in a lifetime opera, unfortunately.
There you've got a once in a lifetime and a joy of missing out.
Yeah,
for balance.
All bases covered. That's all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Erin O'Halloran and Justin Quirk. Today's show was produced by Thomas Waterhouse and researched by Kaylee Martin. Our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time tomorrow. Thanks for listening.